Good afternoon and welcome to Politics and the Pulpit, here with your irreverent Reverend Pastor Jerry Cook and your host here on Politics and the Pulpit every Wednesday at 2 p.m. on KHTS 98.1 FM and 1220 AM. It is good to be back with you today on this completely changed weather here in Southern California. Just a week ago, I was on air, and it was 106 degrees. Now it is 78 degrees with puffy clouds in the sky, having survived the hurricane. Yeah, those weather people, they overpromise and they totally underperform. I was waiting for floods and deluges, but unfortunately we did not get those, and I had to sadly put away my ark back in the garage. Let me give you a few shameless plugs here as we are just about to talk about a few things before we get to our guest today, Pastor Jerry Scheidbach from the Lighthouse Baptist Church in Santa Maria. He is the author of the book, Let My People Breathe, and I will more properly introduce him here in just a few moments. But if I might get a few shameless plugs out of the way, this coming Sunday at 2 o'clock, there is a Santa Clarita Valley Liberty Parade. They'll be meeting at 2 o'clock at Bridgeport Elementary, where we will all be coalescing, and yours truly will kind of say a few words and open up in prayer, and hopefully we can all go out and just be a good patriotic example to the community here in Santa Clarita. So again, that's SCV Liberty Parade this Sunday, September 18th at 2 p.m., meeting at Bridgeport Elementary. You can go to their Facebook page, SCV Liberty Parade, and you can go ahead and like and put down interested or whatever the case might be. Encourage folks to come out to that. Also, if you're interested in a good Bible-believing church that is not a threat to your grandmother and is not into rock and roll and fog machines, then I'd encourage you to give Freedom's Way Baptist Church a try. We're located in Santa Clarita. We've been here for 20 years. You can check us out at Freedom's Way Baptist Church. That's Freedoms with an S, freedomswaybaptistchurch.com. This coming Sunday, we will have with us two guests. The mayor of Santa Clarita, Mayor Pro Tem Laureen West, will be with us in the morning service at 10:30 a.m. if you'd like to come out and see Laureen. And also, believe it or not, I know you're going to have a hard time with this because some people are already having a hard time with this, but we have City Council candidate David Barlava coming as well, or Barlavi, excuse me, and he is from the opposite side of the political spectrum that I represent, but some people were a little concerned that I was having him, thinking that maybe I was switching sides. That is not the case. We do not cancel people on the conservative side, so we are going to give the opposite side an equal opportunity to share their particular perspective, and we are going to, as Bible-believing Christians, sit there and listen with respect. We don't cancel anybody, and so we will welcome David Barlavi to the Freedom's Way Baptist Church this Sunday as well. So those are the shameless plugs. Thank you very much for laboring with me. But let me just start off this afternoon by warning those of you that are MyPillow owners that you just might be next. Yeah, I cannot believe that I have to mention that the MyPillow guy, Mike Lindell, was raided and his cell phone taken from him while standing in line at a fast food joint. Yeah, this is where we are today in America. For the 4 years of the Trump administration, the left was telling us that Trump was targeting his political opponents, or at least would target his political opponents. They were telling us for 4 years that Trump was a fascist. They were telling us for 4 years that Trump was a dictator. They were telling us for 4 years that Trump was a tyrant and that Trump was, well, you fill in the blank. Trump was everything, including Adolf Hitler. But in reality and in truth, it was the left that was in fact doing all the things they said Trump and the right was doing. It was a huge, giant, oversized head fake. Just the other day, I believe it was Steve Bannon who said that there were some 35 raids that occurred all in one day against those with ties and allegiances to former President Trump. Yes, you heard me right. Our government and our tax dollars being used against not China, against not Russia, not even against Iran, but against our own fellow American citizens. We are living through some of the most disgusting times in our modern history. And let me just say that was not hyperbole. This is utterly disgusting. There's absolutely no self-awareness from this administration and the collective left. Just yesterday, the hologram in chief and the White House staffers took a victory lap while the Dow Jones tumbled over 1,000 points. The inflation number was virtually unchanged from a month ago, and the cost of just about everything continues to go up. If you're here in Southern California, you'll notice that gas has gone up appreciably for the last 6 days in the last week. No more of the $4.99 that we thought was a complete bargain 5, 6, 7, 8 days ago. Now it's back up to $5.15. And yes, I just said that the hologram in chief yesterday, on the same day that the Dow Jones tumbled over 1,000 points, the inflation number did not change, and the cost of just about everything continues to go up. They did a victory lap with what seemed like a bunch of people out in the crowd that were average, normal Americans, but in reality, the vast majority of the crowd that was listening to the president yesterday were a bunch of White House staffers that were kind of, paid to be there. The day-to-day denial of reality is astounding from this administration. Thankfully, for those of us who are Christians, who believe that Jesus Christ is our Lord and Savior, and our hope and faith is not in government, but unfortunately, as my pastor is fond of saying, while we long for the sweet by and by, we are currently stuck in the nasty now and now. But enough about the left's outright denial that the sky is blue and that grass is green, of course, unless you live in California with water restriction. I'd like to switch gears and bring on our guests for today. We talked about him last week. Jerry Scheidbach is the pastor of Lighthouse Baptist Church in Santa Maria, California. He is the host of his own weekly podcast called The Brain Massage, which you can subscribe to. Jerry Scheidbach is also the author of several books, including God's War, and his latest book, which we're going to talk about today, Let My People Breathe. Pastor Scheidbach, welcome to Politics and the Pulpit.
Thank you. Thank you. Glad to be with you, my dear friend.
Good to be with you, sir, and thanks for coming on today. I wanted to ask you a few questions about your book, but before I do that, I wanted to get your reaction of the administration targeting just average Americans like Mike Lindell, who has a great story, a guy that was a drug addict and, got clean and, according to him, found the Lord Jesus Christ and, started an American Dream type company with the MyPillow, which is, of course, expanded to other areas like slippers and coffee and all kinds of other things. But what was your response when you found out about that?
I was so disheartening, but unfortunately not unsurprising. Not surprising, I'm sorry. It's just amazing to me that the left is projecting all of this stuff on what they refer to as the radical right. And they're the ones doing all these weird things. They're the ones, fascism is the combination of government through business controlling the lives of the people. And that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
And Trump hasn't done one single thing that even looks like fascism. And yet they can't stop referring to him as a fascist. And then, of course, like he has said so many times, they're not after him. They're really targeting us. That is it's a broader category than what I'm going to describe right now, but this is certainly the heart of it. The Christian, conservative, Bible-believing patriot. It seems to me to be their primary target.
Yeah, it's amazing that in the 4 years of the Trump administration that the left kept harping and complaining about how Trump was targeting or had the potential of targeting his political opponents and things of that nature. But yet, here we are just in the first 2 years of the hologram in chief, and it seems like everything that they said about Trump is exactly what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And
it's a psychological projection is what it's called.
No doubt about it.
And that's what they're busy with. It was not surprising, though, because I believe that Lindell is over the target. and he's bringing out some things they don't want to get out.
Absolutely.
So if you can't discredit the message, you attack the messenger.
Absolutely. Well, let's set up by way of an illustration with your book here, entitled "Let My People Breathe." Let's say I'm driving down the street, minding my own business. My windows are rolled down, listening to some good preaching or talk radio on the radio, and I stop at a stoplight, and my left eye is caught by the car next to me, where the car has all four windows rolled up. It's 105 outside, and the person inside is wearing a mask, and there's nobody else in the car.
Yeah, that's got to be psychological also.
I have found that to be one of the oddest things in the last 2 years, is to see somebody alone in the car with a mask on.
Yeah.
And I've often thought to myself, is there some quasi-religious reason for why people do this? And that'll be a question that I want to ask you in just a second. But I want to ask you this question. Why did you feel the need to write this little booklet?
Well, it's an interesting story. I got the impression that the church, our church here in our community, should address this fear that seems to have just prevailed upon our community and creating this bizarre and irrational behavior. Because, I've been around a little while, and I've always had an interest in science.
Sure.
And so I was aware that Western science has never embraced the idea that masks were going to protect you from anything so small as a virus.
Sure.
So when I saw this going on, I'm thinking, what's going on? And when things are happening around you that make no sense at all, it's a good idea sometimes to step back and say, what sense does this make?
Yeah.
And so somebody has an agenda that's served by distorting this whole the whole thing about science. I became very alarmed at what appeared to me to be a trend of moving from a culture that embraced real science to a culture that was going to start being premised on superstition, because that's exactly what they're doing. This stuff it's all driven by a superstitious belief that there's an invisible bug floating around out there that you're going to stop getting into your body by wearing a mask that has pores that are literally 3 times the size of that little invisible bug you're trying to block. So anyway, that caused me to think, okay, this is a fear-based thing. They're shifting away from science. They're pushing us over into a superstition kind of based culture. That alarmed me, because the Bible talks about something called science falsely so called.
Yep.
The Bible's totally all for science, but not the false science that's being used right now to drive people with fear.
Our mutual friend, creation evangelist Russ Miller, is fond of saying, science is the Bible's best friend.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And
it's well said, and here.
And
in fact, Christians basically started the whole Western scientific traditions that we enjoy today.
Yeah, and of course that's part of the rewriting and revisionism of current history, right, is to basically suggest that it was the Christians that suppressed science back in the day, and when in reality the vast majority of the early scientists were predominantly Christian, and
exactly right.
And advocated for an open-mindedness when it came to certain things like this. But what's interesting to me, Pastor Scheidbach, is before the pandemic occurred, we only saw pictures of countries that were mainly Asian that used to wear masks. For instance, Japan, China. Those countries, they seem to wear the mask because of pollution and things of that nature. But now, it seems like we've exported a lot of what those countries have done right here in the Western Hemisphere.
Yeah, I've studied over 760 scientific articles, research papers on this topic, and that's a lot of reading, a lot of study.
Well, I'm glad you did it, not me.
Yeah, if I lay that material out in front of me, organized by date, I see a clear development a clear trend from Western science to embracing Eastern science, specifically Chinese-influenced science.
Yeah.
In the earlier period, again, from the 760 studies, a whole bunch of them are from before COVID, a whole bunch of them during COVID, and a whole bunch of them after COVID. And there's a very clear, distinct development of a trend toward Eastern science.
That's a good segue for my next question, Pastor Scheidbach, which is, and this is something that I've thought of, and I don't know if there's any basis in reality to this. This is just a gut feeling, but do you believe there is some sort of quasi-religious reason for why people wear the mask?
Well, yeah, a religious reason would be something driven by a belief system. And I think it's really more about the fact that most of these people are animated, motivated by a belief system that exits God, rather than embraces Him. They don't have that confident security in belief in our Creator that we have.
Yeah.
So they're left to be just made totally terrified and afraid of the boogeyman and so on by this science falsely so called that's using fear to drive their agenda.
No, I agree.
That's a big reason I wanted to write this book, to help people realize science is good. Science is our friend, as our dear brother Russ reminds us so often. Indeed. Let's follow the science, by all means. But let's follow real science.
Have you noticed also the phrase that has been bandied about in the last couple of years, which is, what does the science say?
Yeah.
Because it almost gives an animate quality to science, which, of course, we know that science is just the study and testing of certain things, which is done by a human, obviously, but we give it an animated characteristic by saying, what does the science say? We as Christians say, well, what does the Bible say? And the reason why we say that is because the Bible is, well, it's alive, right? And,
yeah, that's right.
And so the implication when they say, what does the science say, is they're kind of giving it the same kind of weight that we would the Scriptures.
By all means, that's exactly what they do. And by they, we would define they, in this case, as being those who are secularists, who don't believe there's any activity or any presence of God in the affairs of men.
Sure.
So they're left with only an observation of the physical world without any understanding of the fact that God created it, and the order we see there is a reflection of the design and order of God and all that kind of stuff. They don't have that paradigm.
Yeah.
They don't think in that context. So all they have is what the scientist tells them.
Yeah.
And that's something that's called scientism. Statements of scientists are not science.
Yeah.
They're statements of scientists.
Yeah.
Science is the work the scientist does to provide support and basis for scientific statements. But just because a scientist says something doesn't make it science.
Yeah, we're speaking to Pastor Jerry Scheidbach, the author of his book, Let My People Breathe. And I wanted to ask the question before we go to our first break here, Pastor Scheidbach, and maybe we'll probably reserve most of the answer for after the break. But with all the data and research that upends the effectiveness of mask wearing that is readily available, I'm assuming even to the average Joe out there, they can just look it up on the internet. Why do you believe people are still wearing masks now? And do you think this might be a new normal for a good portion of our country? I mean, not maybe people like you and I, obviously, but for a good portion of our country, it seems like no matter how the numbers trend down when it comes to COVID, and no matter how things seem to be getting back to somewhat of normalcy, there seems to be a strong minority out there that are just hell-bent, if you will, to just maintain the mask wearing in public.
I know. Well, there is that fear element, but there's something else maybe I think a little more deep.
Okay.
I mean, it goes all the way back to the garden. when Adam and Eve fell in their disobedience and their sin, what was their first instinct?
Hide.
Hide. It was to hide. We've seen that in young people. They want to wear their hair down over their face, right?
Yeah.
They want to hide. It's kind of a characteristic of fallen nature to want to hide.
Yeah.
And I think that element is at work here. I think people feel comfortable hiding their face from the world.
Well, I want to continue to navigate through that query here after the break and talk a little bit more about some of the research that you did that literally upends the effectiveness of mask wearing. And you talked a little bit at the outset there about how some of the pores in the mask are actually larger than the actual virus itself. And so when we come back on Politics in the Pulpit, we'll continue our conversation with Pastor Jerry Scheidbach, the author of Let My People Breathe, here on KHTS, your hometown station, 98.1 FM and AM 1220. See you in a minute. All right, welcome back here to our final segment of Politics and the Pulpit. Here, your holy host, Pastor Jerry Cook, here on your hometown station, AM 1220 and 98.1 FM. Our final segment here with Pastor Jerry Scheidbach and his book, Let My People Breathe. Pastor Scheidbach is the pastor of Lighthouse Baptist Church in Santa Maria, California. That is in our Central Valley, a huge farming community up there. And Pastor Scheidbach and I go way back to the early 1990s when he was one of my many professors at Bible College. So we still have a friendship, don't we, Pastor Scheidbach?
Well, we certainly do, my dear friend. We do.
We share an awesome first name.
Yes, we do. That's an immediate connection there that'll create an eternal bond.
No doubt about that. So if folks wanted to get a copy of your book, Let My People Breathe, how would they get it, Pastor Scheidbach?
Well, right now it's available as a PDF-I only. It'll be published as a full ebook probably within a month or so.
Okay.
But anyone anxious to get hold of that material and begin reading it can get it at books@dbp.com.
Say that one more time.
Word, that's books, and the word at, A-T, David Baker Paul, dbp.com.
And if folks want to listen and subscribe to the brain massage and get that weekly brain massage, how would they access that?
Go to Brain Massage, one word lowercase. I think most folks know the drill there. brainmassage.net.
And what are some of
you can get your weekly brain massage.
And what are some of the things that you have been dealing with on the weekly brain massage?
I'll say again?
What are some of the things that you've been dealing with lately on the brain massage?
Oh, well last week we addressed the issue of how the vaccines were trotted out there in such a way that really created a problem with herd immunity, as it's called.
Sure.
And interfered with the development of natural herd immunity. I prefer to call it community immunity.
Sure.
Because I don't view people as herds. But they traditionally call it herd immunity. And the vaccines trotted out in such a way, were brought out in such a way, as actually interfered with God's natural process for a community to handle this issue of immunity.
Interesting. So folks can listen to the brain massage, and I'm sure that's titled, and they can probably listen to that at their leisure. One last question for you, Pastor Scheidbach, before I let you go and before this segment is over, and I don't know how much time we're going to be able to deal with this particular topic, but maybe this might be a topic for a future show. But as pre-tribulational, premillennial end-time believers, and of course those on the Christian spectrum will know what I'm talking about on the radio here, but how much damage do you think some on the pre-trib side have contributed to the culture wars when they basically say things like, well, the Lord's coming back, right now, so I'm just going to lay back and not do anything, and in the meantime, the Lord has, quote, delayed his coming, and course, we know he's not really
Yeah.
delayed it, but you get my point.
Yeah.
He's delayed his coming, and the culture wars have run roughshod over us. And instead of conquering, we are more than conquerors in Christ and that kind of stuff. We're just kind of, laying back and letting the culture war run roughshod over us. What say you to that question?
Yeah, that is a problem, but it really isn't a problem that's created by the doctrine,
Mm-hmm.
and that's because Jesus himself said we are to watch and pray because you don't know the day or the hour.
Mm-hmm.
Or in other words, from Jesus' point of view, the whole truth that we don't know when he's going to return should motivate us to be very careful in our activity every day, and we should be watchful. That word watch is a kind of military term,
Yeah.
and it means you are alert and aware and engaged and taking care of business at hand.
Yeah.
So it's the reverse. Really, the idea that Jesus could come at any moment should motivate every believer to be fully engaged with whatever's going on right now that might interfere with our ability to finish our mission, and that is to get our message out to every person in the whole wide world. And the things that are developing right now in our government are just the sorts of things that will ultimately work toward interfering with our ability to preach freely.
And if folks want to know a little bit more about Lighthouse Baptist Church in Santa Maria, where do they go?
Go to, there's so many different web addresses. Use santamarialighthouse.org for our website.
SantaMariaLighthouse.org.
Yeah.
And that's where they
Catch
can
us
find
on
out.
Facebook. We live stream a lot. We're very active there. We've got a YouTube channel that people can get a lot of material from. So we're definitely out there.
Well, we appreciate you being on today, Pastor Scheidbach, and Lord willing, we'll see you here in a little bit over 48 hours. And so,
Yeah.
Lord willing, everything goes well as you head up a little north of you. And thank you very much for being on Politics in the Pulpit today.
Well, thank you so much, Pastor, for allowing me to have the opportunity. I appreciate you and your ministry.
All right.
Talk
Thank you,
to
sir.
soon.
Thank you today for listening to Politics in the Pulpit. This is Pastor Jerry Cook encouraging you one last time for this Sunday, September 18th at 2 p.m., SCV Liberty Parade, meeting at Bridgeport Elementary. Encourage you to come out and show your patriotism, and if you're a proud Christian, display that as well. We'd encourage you to do that. Again, we'll catch you next week, Wednesday, here on Politics in the Pulpit on your hometown station, KHTS, AM 1220 and 98.1 FM. Take care.